Some of you may have seen the Bard video I did earlier this week. If you haven't, definitely go check that out, because this build isn't going to make any sense from a teamwork standpoint if you don't watch that video. I'm going to try to explain why we're taking the feats we're taking very briefly, but you should definitely watch that video as well. Let's dive in. So all bards in Pathfinder 2e, including the build I did earlier this week, are going to have trouble with a couple of types of enemies. One is those with high will saves. But the main one that bards are going to have trouble with the most is Undead. So with this build, we're going to be focusing on helping the bard deal with Undead, as well as protecting him from any melee attackers that decide to come his way. To that end, the Ancestry for this build is going to be the Death Warden Dwarf. So if we get a success on a save against a Necromancy effect, then we get a critical success instead. A lot of Undead do use Necromancy effects. Also, if we run into a Necromancer, they're definitely going to be using Necromancy effects. So this will help us resist Necromancy effects in general. The class for this build is going to be the Champion, and we're picking up the Redeemer cause. This will give us the Glimpse of Redemption reaction. When an enemy damages our ally and they're both within 15 feet of you, you force them to make a choice. Either the attack in question does no damage, or the ally gains resistance to the damage equal to 2+ your level, and the foe becomes enfeebled 2 until the end of its next turn. This is going to help against really strong enemies, but we're really taking the Redeemer cause for our first class feat, which I'll get to in a bit. The background for this build is going to be the Junker background. We are going to have high strengths, but at low levels we might want to carry a bunch of stuff. So Hefty Hauler will help us with that. The starting stats for this build are going to be Strength 18, Dexterity 10, Constitution 14, Intelligence 10, Wisdom 14, and Charisma 12. We are going to have to deal with a minus to Charisma for being a dwarf. However, we aren't going to need a hugely high Charisma, at least not in the beginning of this build. We are eventually going to need a high Diplomacy and Intimidation check, which is why we're putting 2 boosts into Charisma. We are a champion, so we need to be able to talk to potential allies. Also, this build is going to really benefit from being able to frighten enemies. Which brings me to my first class feat, Weight of Guilt. Now when we use Glimpse of Redemption, if they choose to deal damage, we can make them Stupefied 2 instead of Enfeebled 2. This is really going to help us demoralize our foes. But more importantly, this combined with the Demoralize action will really help the Bard target their will saves. And that's what's important here. For our next feat, we're trying to take out the Undead that our Bard has trouble with. So, we will be taking Shining Oath. So, we add the following tenet to our other tenets. You must destroy any undead you run into as long as you have a reasonable chance of success. In the unlikely event that you find a good undead, you can find a more peaceful way to help it recover from its undead state, such as helping it find peace. The resistance from your Glimpse of Redemption increases to 7+ your level against undead. You do not consider undead to be legitimate authorities, even in nations ruled by undead. This is mainly so that we can give our allies some resistance against undead. Also, there's a feat we're going to take later on that requires this feat, but we'll talk about that later. At 3rd level, when we get our Divine Ally, we're going to pick up the Shield Ally. This will increase our shield's hardness by 2 and its HP and break threshold by half. It will also allow us to take some defensive feats we'll need to take later in this build. Next up is Aura of Courage. So whenever we become frightened, we reduce the condition by 1. Also, at the end of our turn, whenever we would reduce our frightened condition by 1, we also reduce the frightened condition of all our allies within 15 feet by 1. This is just something that will help us and our allies recover from the frightened condition. Some undead do inflict the frightened condition as well, so this is going to help with that. But we're not just trying to help the bard in this build, we're also trying to help out the rest of our team. So this will help with that. Shield Warden is going to help us protect the bard and our other allies from attacks. When we have our shield raised, we can use our shield block reaction to protect allies. The allies do have to be adjacent to you, but otherwise this follows the same rules as regular shield block. Our bard is especially going to like this since he doesn't have much HP or AC. So we've talked about a lot of feats that give us and our party defense against undead. But for this build, we're also going to need offense against them. To that end, we're going to be taking second ally next. And we're going to want to pick up the blade ally here. This will allow us to add one property rune to our weapon. Not only can we add shifting or returning property runes to our weapon, but more importantly, we can add the ghost touch or disrupting rune to our weapon as well. Those last two will allow us to do more damage to undead. And that's why this is important. Plus, this will allow us to take some other feats for our offense later in this build. The next feat for this build is Radiant Blade Spirit. This will add property runes to what we can choose with Blade Ally. Since we're a Redeemer and we're neutral good, we can choose from Flaming or Holy now. We could choose from one more if we weren't a Redeemer, but remember, we're trying to take out the undead that the bard is going to have trouble with. And a lot of undead are weak to good damage. We only get one rune at a time anyway from this, and Holy is what we're going to pick most of the time when we're going up against undead anyway. And as you'll see when we get to the free archetype, we're not always going to have to pick Disrupting or Ghost Touch for our Blade ally. Alright, next is Lasting Doubt. So when we use Glimpse of Redemption and our foe chooses to do damage, then if we choose to make them enfeebled 2, then they are enfeebled 1 for 1 minute after that. Since we do have Weight of Guilt, we can also make them stupefied 1 for 1 minute after we make them stupefied 2. But if the flat check to cast a spell results in failure, the foe is no longer stupefied. We're taking this for the same reason that we became a Redeemer in the first place. To help the bard deal with foes that have high will saves, including those undead that we're built towards. Now, for our 14th level feat on this side of the free archetype, we're going to be taking Aura of Life. This is one of the reasons why we took Shining Oath. Us and all allies within 15 feet of us gain resistance 5 to negative energy and a +1 bonus on saves against necromancy effects. Some undead do use negative energy effects, and this is so that if we run into that necromancer, boom, our party is resistant to him. Blade of Justice is another offensive option for us to use against undead, or against any evil creature in general. For 2 actions, we can make a melee attack or unarmed strike against a creature. If that creature is evil, then the strike deals 2 extra weapon dice worth of damage. Whether or not the target is evil, we can convert all physical damage from the attack into good damage. This is mainly our ace in the hole, do as much damage as possible to undead. Because most undead are evil, plain and simple. But we can also use this against any evil creature if we know they're evil. Shield of Reckoning will let us give a bunch of damage reduction to our bard and anyone else in our party, especially against damage from undead. Now we can use our champion's reaction and shield block on our ally at the same time. This is mainly so that we can keep our party members up longer, especially that bard that we're built toward helping. And the last feat on this side of the free archetype is Radiant Blade Master. This will give us more choices for our blade ally. Now we can pick from Dancing, Greater Disrupting, or Keen, as well as the other options for blade ally that we have. More options for how we can do damage is always good. Now we move on to the free archetype. Our first dedication is going to be the Ghost Eater dedication. This will make our weapons and unarmed strikes magical. Also, against incorporeal creatures, we gain the Ghost Touch property rune on our weapon. This will allow us to deal with incorporeal creatures even if we run into them a little early. We're all about fighting undead, so this will help us deal with ghosts. Then we'll want to take Reach Beyond. This will allow us to make melee strikes against incorporeal creatures hiding inside objects. These creatures are hidden, so we must make a DC 11 flat check in order to target them. However, we can spend an action with the Concentrate trait to focus on an incorporeal creature inside an object. If we do, we only require a DC 6 flat check to target that creature with our next melee strike. Lots of incorporeal undead love to hide inside objects. So with this feat, if we know that they're there, then we can target them. And if we target them, then they'll probably realize that we know where they are and come out, allowing the rest of the party to attack them. Then there's Disrupting Strikes. For one action, we can give our weapon and unarmed strikes the effects of the Disrupting property rune. Once we get to 14th level, we'll be able to use this feat to give our weapon and unarmed strikes the greater Disrupting rune. Yes, we already have the capability of giving our weapons these runes, but this will allow us to get our Disrupting rune and our Holy rune on the same weapon. Because remember, Blade Ally only gives us one property rune. Also, if we know we're going up against a bunch of undead, it's probably better if we get our Disrupting rune through our Blade Ally and not this feat. So we can get 2 disruptive strikes rather than 1 disrupting strike and Holy, and still raise our shields. Alright, now it's time for our second dedication, the Ghost Hunter dedication. This will give us training in Spirit lore or Haunt lore, or a different lore skill if we're already trained in both of those. But we probably want to pick Spirit lore for this, since we're focusing on Undead here to help out our bard. It'll also give us 2 occult cantrips, but these cantrips must be from the Divination, Enchantment, or Necromancy schools. This is one of the reasons why we need good charisma as well. If you want to know what spells to pick for this and the next feat in this build, you can check out my Teamwork Spells playlist in the card. Spirit Spells is the next feat for the free archetype. We're taking this at 10th level, so we're going to gain 1st, 2nd, and 3rd level innate occult spells. If you don't want to look at my Teamwork Spells playlist, then some good options for this build are Impending Doom and Liberating Command. Impending Doom will let us debuff our enemies, and Liberating Command will give us a lesser version of the Liberator's reaction. That will be very handy for when the Bard or other spellcasters are being grabbed. We only get each of these spells once a day, but it's still very, very good for this build. And then we'll take Peer Beyond. This will give us a +2 bonus on mental effects caused by incorporeal undead or haunts. In addition, we can roll Spirit lore or Haunt lore for initiative if we know that a haunt or incorporeal undead is present. Also, if we are present when a haunt or spirit is defeated, then we gain a flash of insight as to how that haunt or spirit can be put to rest. We attempt a Spirit lore or Haunt lore check respectively with a DC appropriate for the spirit or haunt's level. On a success, we get a hint as to how to put the spirit to rest or to permanently disable the haunt. On a critical success, we learn the exact method of doing so. Like I said, we're focusing on undead here, not haunts, so we probably want to pick up Spirit lore. That means we're going to be using this feat to put spirits to rest and not permanently disable haunts. Alright, this build is a champion build, so we're going to need a little bit more defense. To that end, our last dedication for the free archetype is going to be the Bastion dedication. This will give us the reactive shield reaction, so we can raise our shield as a reaction. The previous Bard build will allow us to raise our shield as a reaction, but only during the Bard's turn. This will allow us to raise our shield as a reaction when the Bard doesn't want to use that ability. Then we'll want to take Quick Shield Block. This will give us 2 reactions around, but one of them has to be a shield block. So we can raise our shield and then shield block, or we can use our champion's reaction and shield block, or we can use Shield of Reckoning and shield block. The point is, this gives us a little more versatility with our reactions. Nimble Shield Hand will allow us to treat our shield hand as free for the purposes of the interact action. Also, we can hold an object in our shield hand, we just can't use it to wield a weapon. This is mainly so that we can use potions when we need to. We're not built around lay on hands like some other champions, so we're not going to be able to use that to heal ourselves. So we're going to need to have some potions on us, and this feat will let us use them. And our last feat for the free archetype is going to be Reflexive Shield. This will allow us to add our shield's bonus to our reflex saves when we have it raised. Also, we can now use our shield block reaction to defend against effects that require a reflex save, even if they don't deal physical damage. Our reflex save is definitely going to be low, so anything we can do to increase that is going to help immensely. Now it's time to talk about Ancestry feats. Our first Ancestry feat is going to be Unburdened Iron. We're a dwarf. We're already slow. We don't want to be any slower. We're going to be wearing full plate for this build eventually, so this will get rid of the speed penalty from that. Also, anytime our speed would be reduced for another reason, like a spell for instance, we reduce that speed by 5 feet. This part will help us when enemies want to slow us down. Next up is Rock Runner. Again, this is going to help us with our speed. We get to ignore difficult terrain caused by rubble and other things made of stone and earth. In addition, whenever we try to balance on these types of surfaces, we aren't flat-footed. Also, if we get a success on the acrobatics check to do this, then we get a critical success instead. We probably aren't going to be very good at acrobatics, which is why that second part really doesn't matter. We're more interested in the ignore difficult terrain parts. Also, Rock Runner is a prerequisite for our next Ancestry feat, Boulder Roll. We can use 2 actions to step into the square of a foe that is our size or smaller. The foe must move into the empty space directly behind it, and it must do so even if that puts it in harm's way. The foe can attempt a fortitude saving throw against our athletics DC in order to block our step. However, if they do this, then unless they critically succeed on the save, they take damage equal to our level plus our strength modifier. This will help us push those undead away from the bard, or other spellcasters. However, if the foe cannot take a step back due to being surrounded by physical objects or creatures, your boulder roll has no effects. Overall, just slowly push enemies into hazards and away from spellcasters. With Mountain Stoutness, we increase our maximum hit points by our level. Also, the DC of our recovery checks is 9 plus our dying value, instead of 10 plus our dying value. Also, if we've got Toughness, which we are definitely taking for this build, then the HP stacks, and our recovery checks decrease to 6 plus our dying value. With this feat, we're going to have more hit points than a barbarian without this feat. And a champion with high HP is always going to be good. And now we come to the real reason why we took Dwarf as our Ancestry. Our last Ancestry feat is going to be Scrutinizing Gaze. This will give us a +2 bonus on sense motive checks to determine whether someone is being possessed or under the influence of something that would make them controlled. We also gain a +2 bonus to perception checks to see through the disguises of undead. In addition, we also receive a +2 circumstance bonus on checks to seek when trying to find undetected or hidden haunts or undead within 30 feet of you. And finally, if you are not seeking, the GM rolls a secret check for you to find these things anyway. But instead of the +2 circumstance bonus, you receive a -2 penalty. This is just another way for us to find undead that are hiding from us. So now let's talk about general feats. First off, we are taking Die Hard and Toughness so we don't die. And we're taking Canny Acumen for our lowest save, which is going to be Reflex. Then we'll be taking Fleet so we're just as fast as a human without armor in our armor. And then we'll take Incredible Initiative so we can get right in there and protect our allies. And that's going to do it for this build. So if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Pathfinder 1 and 2e teamwork content. You can also check out the links in the description below. Also, don't forget to check out my Bard video right here if you haven't already. And remember, teamwork is vital, and I'll see you guys next time.